All right.
All right. So how are things? You're in Cairo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, how are things there with the pandemic and everything?
They're okay. There's a curfew. People aren't really following it, unfortunately, like they're supposed to, but they're trying to tame the situation. We don't have as many cases as like the US and Europe and stuff, but they're trying to tame it. People are just not really listening, but they have a curfew intact, and I think next month or something they're going to start to open up more things, or try to at least.
Yeah, I'm in Canada, on the east coast of Canada, and same sort of thing. Like they just opened up like golf courses and stuff like that, but it's very like the mayor, I guess, said like we're gonna open stuff up, but don't be stupid, which obviously means people are gonna be stupid. But yeah, it's weird. It's such a weird time. And how do you feel about the UFC doing what they're doing? Like obviously, as a UFC fan, I love it, but a lot of the media have been giving Dana backlash. A lot of them are supportive. Where do you stand on that?
You know what? In the beginning, I was a bit like, maybe they shouldn't do it and stuff like that. But then I realized it's like with this thing, it's kind of hard to know when things can get back to normal. There isn't like one thing that's going to happen where everything's suddenly going to be okay. And people need to get back to their lives and get back to their jobs. So I understand like Dana kind of wants to be ahead of the curve and then be the first one to do so. He's stubborn like that. But I just feel like if you look at the other sports, like they're eventually, like I think it was Bundesliga, like they started, and then the others are trying to follow suit. So eventually everybody's gonna try to start up again, because I don't see things being completely fine and okay anytime soon. So we kind of have to get on with our lives, because a lot of people are losing jobs and stuff like that, and businesses need to continue operating. So in the grand scheme of things, as long as they try to do it safely. The issue with these things, unless like God forbid something really bad happens, people are just going to continue trying. I mean, that's how it is. That people don't want to sit around.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you mentioned Bundesliga. I think we're both big soccer fans. You obviously support Real Madrid. I'm a Barca fan personally, so a little bit of a clash, but hopefully that gets up running soon, because the La Liga it's a tight race there.
Yeah. I mean, we would just want like there will be no crowd anytime soon, but at least like I hope we get to watch the games at home at least.
Yeah, the no crowds in the UFC is very, like, you don't notice it when the fight's taking place, other than like you hear the shots and stuff. But I find like in between rounds, it's super weird, like not hearing anything. It's odd. And you even heard Greg Hardy say like, "Oh, it was nice hearing Daniel Cormier because he gave me some tips." Like I can't imagine like that's something that fighters are used to.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different. I guess people who are on the Contender Series or Ultimate Fighter, it's a little louder because they've got their teams, whatever team they're on, or their family or whatever. So maybe a little louder. But I think in the fight they don't feel it. Maybe in between rounds and stuff. Like it's cool in a spectator standpoint, because you kind of get to hear them when they're like breathing heavy. And then I was thinking like, oh, this guy's gassed, but I'm like, maybe he's always breathing heavy like that, just we can't hear it. So it's just different. It's interesting to watch it like that, but I think it works. I mean, I don't like, as a spectator, I don't see too much of a difference. It's not bothering me personally. So yeah, I think it works completely fine.
I'd like to talk a little bit, I guess, about your journey, because it's very like unorthodox almost. It's very different than most people. Obviously, you're on the other side of the world, so you've got to stay up till crack of dawn watching fights. I've always been a fan of yours. I've followed UFC news alerts for a couple of years now. I find it's accurate and quick. I like guys like Nolan as well, Marcel Dorf. There's a few people I follow who aren't as big, I guess, but kind of talk a little bit about your journey, obviously being in Cairo, and your background. I think you're Moroccan and Palestinian. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And how you got into MMA. Obviously, it's not as big over there, especially a couple of years ago. It wasn't big at all. And how did you fall in love with it? And kind of talk a little bit about your journey, I guess.
My brother got me into MMA. Like I grew up with my brother and my cousin. It was all guys, so they were like either watching pro wrestling or eventually it became MMA. So whatever they would watch, I would as well, because we'd spend summers together in Morocco and stuff. So I kind of got into MMA through my brother and my cousin. So my brother would show me old fights and stuff. So I've been watching MMA maybe since like 2009, but I wasn't like following it religiously or anything. Like I wasn't staying up every weekend. But he'd show me like fights of George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, Matt Hughes, Lyoto Machida, all those guys, and some of WEC as well with Cruz and Faber and those guys. So I started watching it in the beginning just like that, and then eventually I think it was Sun and Silva won. Because like the build up to the fight was so much fun, and I remember my cousin kept like sending me so many highlights and stuff like you got to watch the press conference, you got to watch this. So he got me into it, and it's similar to the whole pro wrestling thing because I used to watch pro wrestling as a kid, so I could definitely appreciate that part of the game, and it was fun. Like the build up was fun, and I was already familiar with who Anderson Silva was, not so much Chael. And then like watching the build up and stuff like that. So we gathered together and we watched the fight live. So that was like the first time I watched like a complete build up to a fight with the weigh-ins, everything. And then the way the fight panned out and stuff was pretty incredible. Like the massive comeback by Silva and stuff. And I think since then I've been intrigued by the other aspects of the sport other than the fight itself, like everything that goes in it. But as far as like covering the sport, like I've always wanted to like be a journalist. Like I played pretty much every sport as a kid growing up, so sports have been a big part of my life. But with MMA, I kind of wanted to cover basketball. I'm not gonna lie, like that was the aim. Basketball is my sport. I play basketball. I still play basketball today until today for fun. But that was the aim. And then for some reason, in the last second, I just made a last second switch. I'm like, there are a lot of people who cover basketball. I feel like MMA is just a sport. Like people don't, like the fighters don't get the appreciation that they deserve, the recognition they deserve. And I felt like I could contribute in some shape or form because that was always my goal. Like I wanted to like grow big enough where I'm actually contributing in terms of coverage and stuff like that. And I just felt like the fighters weren't getting the coverage that they deserve. So, and I made a last second switch from basketball, although it's my sport. Like most people that know me back home will know me as the basketball player. They might not even know that I cover MMA, but I made a last second switch and started covering MMA.
Yeah, I mean, I've been diehard MMA. Soccer is my first sport, but MMA, I kind of fell in love with it the same way. Rampage, Rashad. When Rampage broke down that door on The Ultimate Fighter, I was like, okay, this is. I feel him. Like I was like, that's me. Like I want to do that same thing. I'm angry all the time. So I could relate to Rampage, and that's kind of how I got into it. It's got to be weird being in Egypt though. Like I feel like being on the other side of the world. Obviously, in the Middle East, MMA isn't as large, I guess, as it is here. Obviously, Brave, for example, has started to make a presence, I guess. But a couple of years ago, I think when you got started, it wasn't as big. What were the difficulties you had just kind of making a name for yourself out there in the MMA world?
It was definitely tough because, like I said, like a lot of people until today, like especially back home and stuff, won't really know me as like an MMA journalist. They don't really understand what I do. So I've kind of been like on my own journey, like a little bit alone, and as I like rose up the ranks, if you want to say it like that. So it's been tough in that regard for sure. There is no local scene to cover. So that was hard as well because a lot of people start out like that, and I knew that couldn't be my way. So I went straight, like most people who cover like the regional shows and try to be unique in that regard and then grow from there. I took an opposite approach because I'm like, I can't do that. Like I'm not going to get anywhere like that. So I started like covering the UFC, which is why I started that UFC page on Instagram because as a football fan or soccer, like I used to watch it as a kid and I used to play as a kid, but then I stopped for years when I became a basketball fan. And then I wanted to catch up. And I knew I had so much to catch up on with football. So a friend of mine showed me an Instagram page that it was like a football page that had all the updates. So it'll tell you like Real's playing this team at whatever o'clock, Ronaldo scored this many goals. And it had all the information there. And I'm like, I like this concept of going to one place and finding all the information. So I'm like, why don't I do that for MMA? There were a few out there. But I'm like, I look at them and I'm like, they're great pages. But a lot of them were just like fun highlights and jokes and memes and stuff. I'm like, no, I can actually do something like super kind of like informative and stuff. I'm like, I know it's going to take a lot of time. I never knew how much time it was going to take up. Like it kind of, it was super hectic until today. It still is super hectic to try to run that page. But I'm like, why don't I have like make a page where it's a source where everybody can get all the information they need. And I wanted to focus on the UFC because I'm like, if I make a UFC and Bellator and all of this, it's not going to be as good because it's just going to be way too tough. And I'm going to end up posting like 35 times a day and people are just going to hit the unfollow button or get super annoyed. So I started the opposite way. I went like cover the UFC, try to make a name for myself, and when I do, then I can start benefiting the fighters in the Middle East because I grew a platform that's big enough where I'm beneficial to them, instead of vice versa, because I knew it wasn't going to work that way.
Yeah, I find, especially like right now, I started this 3 weeks ago. I'm an accountant, 9 to 5, so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna ask on Twitter. I've had this Twitter page for a little while where I like match make after the fights, just hobby, no reason. I'm not trying to make it big or anything. And I was like, if I start a podcast and just interview random people, who would be on? Like, who's interested? And within 5 minutes, Mike Rodriguez, Eric Anders, like all these guys were like, yeah, I'd come on. And I didn't even know they followed me. And I was like, wow, all right, great. And I find they're a lot more approachable than, like, you have a much better chance of reaching an Eric Anders than you would someone on the Lakers. And, you know, I find they're super welcoming. They're open to talk to whoever. And it's almost caught me off guard. Like within 4 interviews, I was speaking to a world champion boxer. I was like, this is ridiculous. But they're all open to talk. It's really, really nice to see, as a fan, I guess, to have people just opening up and being willing to talk. As for the Middle East, I've interviewed Motaz Askar, but is there any other fighters? Bilal Muhammad, I think, is the biggest name in the UFC. Is there any other fighters? I'm not familiar with the local scene. I think a lot of people who follow me aren't familiar with the local scene in the Middle East. Is there any names out there where you're like, you got to watch this guy or this girl? They're going to make it big?
Yeah, I mean there are some really solid fighters, like Braves welterweight champion Jarrah Silawi. He's Jordanian. He's a really good fighter. He started out at Cage Warriors, actually. Even shared a card with Conor McGregor back in the day. He's a really talented guy. Was on a 7 fight win streak. Won the title, then lost his title in a controversial close decision, then got his title back in a very definitive win in the rematch. And he's fought some really high level guys as well. So he was one of the guys that I was hoping was going to be on that UFC Abu Dhabi card in September, but unfortunately that was right before he lost his title. So I knew that I don't know if that he was on their radar, because kind of one of the things that bothered me with that Abu Dhabi card, I felt like it was more of a UFC Russia or a UFC Dagestan card, and I wish they had invested a little bit more in the Middle Eastern town, because I feel like there are a lot of solid fighters. Because in Team Nogueira in Dubai has got a couple of fighters. Monir Lazez is another one. He's a great fighter. He's a great striker, super entertaining. I think his first fight with Brave was one of the best fights I'd seen all year of any promotion. So he's a super exciting, talented fighter as well. Trains multiple times with Darren Till. When Darren Till comes into town in Dubai, they're under the same management of NTK. So Till spars him quite a bit. So he's a great fighter as well. That's another guy. He's from Tunisia. So Monir Lazez, Rafidawi. Abdelkarim Solwadi, he's lost his last cup in a row. He trains out of Fortis MMA, but he's also a really talented guy, young guy. I believe he should drop down to featherweight, but he's still got he won the lightweight title for Brave, but lost it. But he's a really talented fighter. He's on a 2-fight losing skid, but he's still got a lot of potential. I hope to see, like, a lot of Fortis guys ended up on Contender Series and then the UFC, and look, they're doing great things. So I believe that could be his path as well. So yeah, there are a lot of talented guys in the Middle East. They just need that platform, I guess, that opportunity, and that's what I hoped UFC Abu Dhabi would be for them. And I was a little disappointed in that regard that it wasn't. But maybe not this year, but next year.
What do you think it will take before you see like an influx of talent from the Middle East? There's only a handful, like the Zaitar brothers, who are great. And Bilal, I think, are the only 3 I can really think of on the top of my head. What do you think it'll take before, like, they start bringing them in and make a big name for themselves, like the Russians, like Russia right now, like half the roster seems to be Russian. What do you think it'll take before, you know, we see maybe even a world champion, even in the UFC, from the Middle East? Do you think that's realistic within like a 5-year period, or do you think it's much, much longer down the road?
I think they just need to invest in the market. I think that's what it is. I mean, them signing the 5-year deal with Abu Dhabi is great. I remember asking Dana White at the press conference. He said they would consider doing a Contender Series there. So that would be huge for the region as well. So I think they just need to invest in it, because the talent is there. But sometimes there might be guys that I don't even know about that could end up being world champions one day. You know what I mean? But they just need that platform. And Brave do a good job. You know, they're an international organization, and they put on good shows. I've covered numerous shows of theirs. So they just need the platform. And I think if if the UFC did what I wish they would have done in September, maybe next time, since it's a 5-year deal, by giving those guys a chance, especially that you get guys who get injured and pull out and they need late replacements. And those are the guys that should be called up since they're based there. I mean, I thought when Don Madge lost his opponent, they did get Farah, who's Algerian French, actually. So he's based in France. But I thought they could have called up this Moroccan fighter, Anas Siraj Munir, based in Dubai, trains out of Team Nogueira. He's an entertaining fighter as well. I felt like he should have gone the call. I mean, why not? If this is a local card, think about it. If it was like UFC Korea, UFC South Korea, or UFC whatever, you would think that they'd call up those guys, right? And we've seen that. We've seen fighters, whether it's in the North Korea cards or Auckland cards or whatever, like get high billing in the main card and stuff like that. So that's what these shows are for. So I just feel like they need to invest in the market a little bit more, whether through a contender series or PFL have a partnership with UAE Warriors, which is another organization, and they were going to do like a featherweight tournament to get a guy. So yeah, stuff like that.
Has there ever been, like, I've seen you interview guys like Frankie Edgar, and every time I see them, I'm like, oh my God, like I'd die to interview Frank. Is there anybody that you've interviewed who you've kind of been like taken away by, like, oh my God, I'm interviewing Frankie Edgar? Or is there anybody that's like kind of taken you away?
I mean, it was back in the day, maybe it was a little more exciting just because when I'm running around, like now working for MMA Junkie, it's nice. And I know that saying that I work for MMA Junkie helps me land a lot of these interviews. Back in the day when I just had my name, maybe it felt a little more satisfying or more fulfilling because I'm just trying to hustle and get stuff done. So yeah, I remember back in the day I interviewed, I think Kevin Lee. I was in Morocco. There was a Brave show that I didn't even know about. I just found out the announcement and I happened to be there. So I took the train to Tangier, and there was a show and Kevin Lee was cornering his brother. So that was cool. Like, it was random and it was spontaneous and it felt really cool. Frankie Edgar was super cool as well. Back in the day, that was a few years ago, I believe. John Kavanagh as well, those guys. But yeah, I spoke to Israel Adesanya recently. That was cool. I mean, the fighters that will give you a good interview as well. It's super cool to talk to them as well because they'll kind of give you as a journalist everything you want, because then you could just imagine the headlines that you're going to write after and stuff like that. So yeah, Colby Covington's another fun one as well. He always has something to say. So yeah, I've been fortunate enough with those guys to get those interviews.
Where in Morocco were you from? Like, I've been to Tangier. I'm from Spain, so I just ferried across. Where exactly in Morocco are you from?
Casablanca.
Oh, okay, so that's not too far from Tangier.
A little bit. I mean, it's more maybe like with the fast train that they're building now, maybe like 2-3 hours. So yeah, with the fast train, no, not before.
Okay, so we'll kind of like wrap it up, I guess, talking about the 3 cards that have happened. It seemed like we went like a year without fights, and then in a week we just got bombarded with 30 fights. Has there been any fighter that stood out to you more? That obviously Gaethje had an amazing performance, going to fight Khabib, but is there any fighter that really stood out to you in these past 3 cards?
Ooh, this is gonna be a tough one. I'm gonna have to put my thinking hat on. But if I go card by card, I mean, 249. Calvin Kattar, I was very impressed with. I believed he could win that fight for sure, but to finish Jeremy Stephens like that, I mean, Stephens doesn't get finished too easily. He's a tough fight. He's had some losses on his record, but a lot of them have been by decision. So that finish by Kattar, I think, was great, and it kind of really propelled him as a top contender, even though he had that recent loss to Zabit. So I was really impressed with Calvin Kattar. Looking at the card, what was the one after? That was they're all called Jacksonville. Oh, yeah. Smith and Glover. Yeah, I mean, that was very impressive by Glover, but I think the story of that fight was more the stoppage and stuff like that. I was surprised that Glover at 40 years old to be able to put up a performance like that. He's on a 4-fight win streak, I believe. So for sure, for him to get that second life in terms of contention, the light heavyweight division is very impressive. I feel like I'm missing somebody, though. I'm trying to think. There were a lot of close decisions yesterday.
Yeah, very controversial decisions too.
Yeah, very controversial. But I feel like, Drew Dober is another one. Drew Dober's, I was very impressed with him to get the finish like that against Alexander Hernandez. So that's another guy that I felt like emerged into a player in the lightweight division. I'm probably missing a couple more. So many people had great performances, but those come to mind.
And I guess kind of like lastly, the little platform I do have of like 400 followers, it's all come from making fights. So we'll kind of like match up. I guess there's a couple fighters to me that I can't really pinpoint who I should match them up with. One of them being Glover Teixeira. He's 40 years old. The light heavyweight division seems to be at a standstill. Who should John fight next? Who do you think he should fight next? I personally think Jan. I'm not a fan of rematches right away. Do you think that's the fight, or do you think Dominic's the fight?
For Glover, maybe
Yeah,
Thiago Santos.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking John Jones.
For Glover, yeah. Oh, you were asking who should John Jones fight?
Yeah.
Okay, Glover, my bad. Yeah. Okay, sorry. Because you're talking about Glover. John Jones. Yeah, I think Jan. I think he although they were close fights with Santos and Reyes. I like what John has been doing, like fighting the next contender in line. It's rare these days, as we can see in MMA, for a guy to consistently keep fighting the number one contender. So I respect him a lot in that regard. And why not Jan? I mean, he had a first round knockout over Corey Anderson right in front of John Jones. There's nothing more he could have done in that regard. And John's team game now, he's talking about Francis Ngannou, so that'll be interesting to see if that happens. But I think John has just been lacking that real motivation because he went from that super heated rivalry with DC. And then these guys are, they're kind of talking back and forth with him a little bit, but they don't hold that name value maybe that he's looking for, or pay-per-view buys or whatnot. But I think if he's going to go like the way he's been going, fighting the next guy in line, I think Thiago Santos and Dominic Reyes should fight, and I think John Jones should fight Jan Blachowicz.
And where does that leave Glover? Is that Glover should fight, who should he fight next? Kind of puts Glover in a weird spot where he's like 40 years old. He's probably a fight away from a title, but two guys that had splits. Jan's in a very good spot. Do you you're like Glover's 40, give him a shot, or you're like, it doesn't deserve it yet?
It's not about deserving or not deserving. I just think John is in a position where maybe he can choose who he wants to fight. Yeah. I mean, he's been kind of the king of the division for so long. Yeah, he's been stripped and whatnot. But I think for him, he'd be a little more motivated to fight Jan than Glover, even though Glover was super impressive. But he already fought him before and he already beat him. And it wasn't even one of those close, controversial decisions. So if he's tentative to rematch Reyes, not because he's afraid or ducking him or anything like that, but from a motivational standpoint, if he's tentative to rematch Santos and Reyes, who took him to the brink, I don't see him fighting Glover next.
All right, and then lastly, one non-MMA question. Why is Ronaldo better than Messi?
I could go all day. No, but look, I think Messi, talent-wise, I'd say he's better than Ronaldo. He's just like a little wizard. I'll admit, I'm blown away every time I watch him. I watch every Barcelona game as well, so I like to keep an eye. Barcelona, Atletico, probably watch all their games as well as Real. But back in the day when Ronaldo was with Real Madrid, I just always liked his killer instinct. He gets criticized a lot for being overly passionate. If Real are up 4-0 and he gets really angry if he misses, and it's like, what difference does it make? But I like that passion. I can relate to that passion. So I've always liked that killer instinct that Ronaldo has. The comebacks that he's made. Trying to remember what team it was against, that German team, not Dortmund. Not Dortmund, Wolfsburg or something, when they were down 2-0 and they ended up winning. He had that hat trick, just that killer instinct, that will to win, never say die attitude. Kind of reminds me of kind of like Michael Jordan, stuff like that, late great Kobe Bryant stuff. That attitude, that killer attitude. So I've always resonated with that with Cristiano. So that's what I can say.
Yeah, my brother plays for FC Basel and he watches videos nonstop, and we're like, watch Ronaldo. We're all diehard Messi fans. But Messi's, it's all natural. You're not going to be able to just become Messi, where you can work hard enough. You can learn Ronaldo's work ethic. You can learn from Ronaldo a lot easier than it is to learn from Messi. With Messi, I'm sure he's worked, no doubt about it. But the work ethic Ronaldo has, I think, stands about kind of like a Kobe Bryant type thing, where, there's no cheat meals. There's no days off. I admire Ronaldo, but I'm a Barca fan, so I have to root for Messi.
Yeah, it's like that. That's the thing. I respect Messi. obviously I get angry at him sometimes when he was waving that Barcelona shirt. I was not happy at all. So I'll get my moments where like I hate Messi in the moment, but like I definitely respect him. He's a legend for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the time. I've been a fan of your page for a little while now, so I appreciate you taking the time to jump on and talk to me for 20 minutes. And I wish you all the best with MMA Junkie, and I'll keep an eye out for your stuff.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, all the best.
You too.